Today is Wednesday, April 27th, 2022. It's 8:35 a.m. And we are considering 4 bills this morning, as well as an amendment that's being offered on H411, which is currently on the floor. So 3 bills and 1 amendment. Those bills are H518, an act related to municipal energy resilience initiatives. After that, we'll move to H697, an act relating to eligibility to reserve forest land for enrollment in the use value appraisal program. Then we will turn to the parent amendment on H411, which is an act relating to retrieval and use of recovered wild animals. And then we'll finish up with H523, an act relating to reducing hydrofluorocarbon emissions at 9:45. Okay, so we have in front of us where we have council on the screen, almost close, and pause until we can. Good morning, thanks for joining us. So before we begin, I just want to check in, make sure we're all on the same draft. The draft I have in front of me is draft number 1.3 of 518, dated 4/26/22 and time stamped 9:03 p.m. Is that the right one for us to go through? Okay. So I had asked council to prepare this based on the conversations we had on things we had agreed to as of end of day yesterday. If you could walk through and just highlight for us where we made the last round of changes, that would, I think, probably be the most expeditious way to zero in on the current version of the bill. Thank you.
Okay, great. So Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. This is, as you said, draft 1.3 of the amendment to H518. There were 2 changes made in this version of the amendment. So the first change is in section 2 of the bill, and this section deals with the assessments of municipal buildings and facilities, where BGS would be issuing an RFP to conduct these assessments. In subsection C on page 2, this is the application process. So a municipality is directed to apply to BGS to receive an assessment of its buildings and facilities. In the previous version, the municipality had to use the assistance of an RPC to develop plans for this application. And this new language says that a municipality submits an application to BGS to receive an assessment pursuant to the guidelines. And then the second sentence was added here that says, as part of the application process, a municipality may use the assistance of a regional planning commission to develop plans. So it's not mandatory. It's up to the municipality to seek out that assistance if they choose to do so.
And just by way of explanation here, Karen Horn and Vermont League of Cities and Towns had said that although they appreciate the support of the RPCs, that there are towns that are capable enough of making the application. They have enough staff and whatever. They've developed enough office and municipal staff to just make the application itself directly. So they wanted the ability to use the RPC if they needed it, but they didn't want to be bound to go through the RPC. Thank you.
Okay, so the next change on page 7 in section 4 of the bill. As you recall, the version of the bill that was passed out of the House had an ARPA appropriation of $48.4 million coming from the Capital Projects Fund. Your committee had moved the source of funds to the ARPA State and Local Fiscal Recovery pot of funds. And then the Appropriations Committee reduced the amount of that to $35 million, and that decrease in the revenue source was not actually reflected in the bill. So I have change that to be in line with what was determined in the Appropriations Committee. So in section 4, line 17, the amount was changed to 35 million. And then on page 8, to kind of make the numbers match up to that 35 million number, rather than 46.4 million going to BGS, on line 11 for the grants, it's 32.6 million. And on line 17, rather than 40 million for grants, it is 26.6 million. And I have kept the amounts of the 2.4 million going to the RPCs, the 5 million for the assessment, and the 1 million for the administrative costs the same, because I believe that those were sort of set amounts that were needed. So I changed the grant amount to reflect that reduction in the appropriation.
So you worked with JFO to get these are, at least at this point, these are the current numbers as the budget that's under discussion.
But yeah, so the 35 million is the current number. I made the grant number work with that 35 million because I believe the other amounts in the bill were less sort of flexible. However, the committee can make that 35 million, allocate it, and however you choose to do so. I know that the $1 million, for example, was being used for positions, and the 5 million for assessments, and the 2.4 million to RPC. So I think those numbers had been sort of fixed for what they're the amounts appropriated for what is needed.
Yeah.
So I thought the only amount that could be reduced was the actual pot for the grant funds.
Okay, well, great. So that, I think that's, makes good sense. And we know that when we ship it out, appropriations committees will adjust it if they see fit. But thanks for making us current as of today. We'll see what things look like tomorrow when they continue to work. Okay. Anything else or changes in this draft?
No, that was those were the two changes for this draft.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, I want to pause. Senator McCormick, you wanted to offer an amendment?
Yes.
I only have what Becky sent me right there. The first one, unless I only have this is what she sent me.
The Senator McCormick's amendment, is it presented as an amendment or strike all or?
It is instances of amendment because it is making sort of just 3 language changes in 3 places in the bill. So I presented it as instances of amendment rather than a strike all of the entire bill.
So did you incorporate that language into the draft you just gave us? Or?
I did not. That was not.
That was my intended to offer it as an amendment. I'd asked for that you draft an amendment.
Yes, I was told to present it separately as not part of the draft 1.3 to the committee. So it was not, I was told to present it as an amendment to the committee's amendment.
Let's do that.
Did she send it to me?
Okay. Let's do that now.
So you want me to incorporate, sorry, I thought my instructions were that it would be sort of voted on separately.
Yes, yes. So I need text.
Yeah.
That's sort of.
Oh, yes, I did. I sent it to you and to Judy. I sent it like 20 minutes ago or so.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, could we hear Senator McCormick's proposed amendment?
I can share the screen.
We think it's a wise and thoughtful amendment,
So
and just
regardless
listen
of
to it on its merits.
instances of amendment or not, which I think is the easiest way to look at it.
The language in the bill as at present says that money can be used for more efficient technology. And which is desirable, but that term, more efficient, can include a more efficient fossil fuel.
Is that something?
And I think of Matt Skoda's comment that at this latitude, you're always gonna need some fire. I've heard people whose personal experiences would indicate otherwise, but I think as policy, we probably do want to allow for the fact that some people will choose to, for example, get a heating pump, but maintain a furnace as well. And that probably the cleaner burning fossil technology is better than dirty fossil technology. So as far as that goes, the language that's already in the bill is fine. The problem is that we're using taxpayer money that has been allocated towards addressing atmospheric carbon and reducing our carbon footprint. And what the amendment says is that we will be explicit that the money goes to clean renewable technology and not to the lesser of evils. Now, that still allows a person who wants to participate in this to maintain their propane heat or their oil heat. First of all, no one has to rip out a functioning system. We're talking about what they do when they, unless they choose to. It's what they do when they have to get a new system. And even if someone wants to use a heat pump and also has security for very cold nights, a more efficient propane or oil burner, they can do that. What the amendment is saying is simply that we're not going to use the taxpayers' money to subsidize that. They would do that on their own time. And if we're taking the taxpayers' money in a program aimed at reducing our contribution of atmospheric carbon, that money should be used for that purpose. And it should be focused.
So, Ms. Wasserman, just so you know, we have hard copies of the instance by instance amendment in hand, so don't worry about that piece. Got sorted out. So, you know, when I look at the bill itself as currently on the table, the one we just walked through, our draft 1.3, on page 3, in the assessment section, it says, the use of a renewable energy source for heating systems. So this is part of what will be assessed. The use of a renewable energy source for heating systems, provided that recommendations for the use of heating systems that use fossil fuel is not eligible. So the assessment already addresses the notion that we're not making fossil fuel systems eligible. And having talked to Brian Sewell of the who runs the program, the SEMP program, of which this is an extension, the history is that even in the current program, they're not using fossil fuels to provide heating. All their programs are oriented to non-fossil fuel consuming solutions. But So I think from my point of view, we have language that addresses it, maybe not formally as you would hope, but given the limitations of time, I would rather, I don't see it. You know, we have a version of the bill on the table, and I'd say, I would ask us to vote that version if we want to consider another amendment, and then take testimony on how, from Mr. Sewell again, or other parties, then I think what we're ending up saying is we're not gonna vote this bill today, and then we're not gonna get over the finish line.
That jeopardizes its passage, like, before the gavel. I would just say in response that first of all, we often do belts and suspenders, just to be sure. And also if the language in the bill pertaining to more efficient, which could include the more efficient fossil fuel use. When you have language in law that contradicts other language in law, it may well be that the language you just cited would prevail, but I'm not sure it would. And if nothing else, it would do no harm, in my view, to make it explicitly clear, extra clear.
Well,
And we just have to work fast.
we have 8 minutes left, so if people are interested in going down this, we will schedule it for later in the week to come back to it. So if the committee's interested in bringing a bill for this session with enough time to get it through, I think I would ask us to not amend the bill at this point and move the last iteration that we just went through. Then we come to
Mr. Chair, anyone installing heat pumps should keep their oil furnace or keep the existing fossil fuel system they have there. A couple dozen nights a year when you might want to turn it on at 9 o'clock at night, turn it back off at 6 in the morning. The advocates understand this. The people that install understand this, and the PUC that's going to write the rules on how to do this, I believe, understand this. And I applaud the advocates that want to make darn sure that we aren't creating loopholes and language mistakes that allow some of the errors that we learned back when we were dealing with electricity. And I think this is covered. It allows for cheaper, cleaner, greener heat, and you don't have to rip out your oil furnace when you get money to put in a heat pumps or something else. And I think that the rulemaking process, reported in the record here at committee, speak to that. And this is belts and suspenders and another set of suspenders. And I'm not going to support the amendment because I think the things that you just articulated will be taken care of without question. And at the time we have ahead of us as we try to get this thing going 2 years from now. So it's a third padlock on the door, and let's move ahead for reasons the chair suggested.
Senator Westman, any thoughts?
I pretty much would echo what the senator from Orange just said. I would make a comment about, I have heat pumps in our farmhouse that we installed, and we installed propane as backup. The place we save the most energy with our heat pumps is in the summer with air conditioning. And Vermont's fast becoming a place where there there are two peaks, one in August and one in January. And the heat pumps aren't perfect, but they've reduced the power bill a lot. And particularly in the summer, they do great. But you do in January, February, I need propane.
So, Senator McCormick, would you like us, the committee, to take a formal vote on your amendment?
No, that's not necessary.
This is, Senator McCormick's proposal. It's a sort of watchdogging that we might have hoped for 20 years ago when we made these things slip by. I think this is coming.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, yeah.
So we don't have our clerk here, so I would look for a motion to amend H518 with a strike amendment, draft 1.3, dated 4/26/22, and time 9:03 p.m.
Now, we just spent the 8 rounds today.
So I
So moved.
Thank you, Senator McDowell. So if there's any further discussion on 5.8, then I'd ask you have the vote sheet. Can you call the roll, please?
Campion. No. McCormick,
Yes.
McDonald. Yes. Marson, yes. Ray.
Yes. So we'll hold it open for Senator Campy.
You got all that.
Well, that was the amendment, so that you need a motion to move the bill as amended.
So that's the motion. Any further discussion?
Yeah.
So, call roll.
Campion, McCormick. Yes. McDonald.
Yes.
Marson, yes. Ray.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Would someone like to report that bill? You want to give it?
You,
Thank you, committee. That brings us. Thank you, Ms. Wasserman.
I don't.
Thanks.
I'll be right back.
So that brings us to case 9-7. Use value appraisal, well, H697, an act relating to eligibility of reserve forest land for enrollment in the use value appraisal program. We had a great discussion about it yesterday, and thank Senator Westman again for working on amendments. The committee took that up, followed up, and based on the committee discussion, I asked council to draft the last place the committee was. And I want to fully acknowledge that Senator Westman had to leave for a committee conference and wasn't here for that last bit of conversation. But in short, it took the 50-30 construct, turned it on its head as a 30-50 construct, meaning that to qualify for reserve forest land for a parcel of 100 acres or less, 50% of it had to be eligible. And when they were over 100 acres, 30% of it had to be eligible to be taken into that category. So that was, it's a working draft, it's in flux, and Commissioner Snyder, would you like to join us at the table?
Sure, if you'd like.
Sure. Because I think at this point, what we most had in play was those members. And you also had, you had caught couple things that you thought weren't quite well expressed in the last draft. So I asked Mr. O'Grady to include those revisions into the current draft. And so that is just so that we're all on the same page. It's on our website for anyone following. Draft 2.4 of 8697 dated 4/27/22, 7:36 a.m. So freshly drafted. You kicked off the concept. So let's go back to you and see what you think of this iteration. And I'd like to also check in with the commissioner and see as well, like,
Well,
do we have the numbers right?
I think there are two, it incorporates in some way the two different pieces. It does turn the 100-acre on its head. I think what turned it on its head, what I didn't have in front of me before I tried to put this together, was the numbers. And I think the department and the commissioner for the numbers, I think it is better with the 50% for the under 100 acres and that. What you didn't mention is there is the piece about moving out of the category. And on page 2, line 13, and I think after we batted it around a little bit, this is way better language than where we started. But it gets at exactly what I think I was interested in getting at. And so it's information.
Thanks. For the record, Michael Snyder, Commissioner for Parks and Recreation. How would you like me to contribute here? What would be helpful?
Sure. So this is your area of expertise. You've done a number of runs
Yes.
with Mr. Thompson.
Correct.
And that was very helpful. So so the agreement when we last met was that it would provide time for you to look at other possibilities and see if the 30/50 construct was something that your department would support. You thought it was workable. We're looking for guidance on those numbers.
Okay. As in the now, and with respect to the amendment in the bill, as opposed to some report back. I just want to be clear.
Right.
Yeah. So to be clear, we put forward in the report the framework that's in the report, that it's in the House passed version, and we have reasons for doing so, and we still consider that to be best.
I'm sorry, but we have a limit of 10 in the room, so.
Want me to leave?
No,
I was going to offer saying.
yeah, no, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
So just reiterate that we put forward the report in good faith. That's and for all the reasons stated within, that's the preferred approach.
Right.
That said, I appreciate, as we indicated yesterday, this is in response to concerns to which we share to a certain extent. And so yes, simply put, I think we can accept it at this point as progress. And agree with Senator Westman that it's actually better than the first iteration.
So just checking in with the committee, is everyone then fine with that first instance of amendment to 30/50 language? Right. So then let's go on to the second, which is land use change tax. We have that new language at the bottom of page 2, and on the conditions around amending the category to subcategory. You want to say a little bit more about what your intent was in the second?
Well, my intent is that, originally the language was faulty because it talked about getting out of current use. This is not about getting out of current use. We're creating a new category. And once that new category is created, if somebody goes in that category, and sits there for 20 years, but then decides they're going to move into another category when they do their 10-year plan for current use. And one category does not allow cutting, and the new category that they are going into would, and it's a piece of old growth forest. I think after we've given years of benefit, that there ought to be at least somebody that questions whether or not the significant portion of that land should be let out. And this is not about going in and out of current use. This is moving within the categories of current use. And if we protected something for a particular reason, I'll use old growth forests, that for someone to switch to a different category, have no penalty or anything after we've given years of benefit, I think it doesn't hurt to have the commissioner take a look at those significant pieces of land.
Shall I
Yeah.
give this response?
So
I certainly
we're talking about
appreciate.
what you or a future commissioner would do.
Right, and I want to start with definitely understand and agree with the senator's point about, like, well, this whole point is to make these things last and et cetera, so you don't want that to be undone. Totally agree with that. So there's some level of permanence in that way. That is some major shift still. I mean, it's much better than the whole out of the program. I just want to note that it's, I guess the best technical phrase would be very clunky in practice out there for the people administering the program and experiencing it. I don't know how much has happened, but it's not elegant. And that's, so again, I don't mean to dismiss the point, and my recommendation would be, given that it's going to be very clunky, could this be, you actually have in here already a provision in one of the reports back about recommend ways to make permanence, more permanence. Embellish that, add to it, drive at this point there, but I would recommend and appreciate the chance to kind of consider how to do this more than just make the commissioner the gatekeeper in a way that doesn't really exist or work well right now. Again, without, I say that respectfully because I totally agree with the point. I just don't think that it seems a little rough to try to figure out right now, I think, how to make that work. And I think there would be time to report back on it because this doesn't go into effect. It will be late. So I'd ask that consideration without trashing the point that I happen to agree with.
So that, just so I better understand what feels clunky. So it would require the commissioner to make a recommendation as to whether the parcel should be enrolled as ecologically sensitive areas or whether those parcels should be conserved through purchase by the state or agreement with the landowner. So
the first part would be just, I'm going to have to, any commissioner would have to rely on field staff and others. We'd need data and information and documentation, site visits, et cetera. So there's just some element of kind of business there to be credible. And then what? The second part is just kind of like, well, to whether those should be conserved or purchased by the state, that's sort of a violation of a basic kind of willing seller, willing buyer principle. We don't want to engage in the you must do something with this, and I don't have the authority to do it anyway. So it's puts the commissioner a bit over his skis, I think, with regard to authority. So again, I'm trying to be careful here because I do appreciate it and want to find a way. I just I feel like I need to flag that this is, as Keith put it, clunky.
well, it feels a little unusual for me to read that you're making a recommendation of whether they should be conserved
Right.
by the state or agreed with the landowner. I don't know that I've seen that kind of language before, as opposed to compelling a particular act. I mean, that's what I would have anticipated, like something we would spell out what would happen. Senator Weston, do you have any thoughts on that? Like the idea of rolling that, how to address that into a report?
I think this is, I want to flag the issue. I think this is all not going into place tomorrow.
Right.
as long as the concept doesn't die, we don't stop talking about this. Before this really goes into place. That's my goal, to create a discussion about how this might work.
You make that so hard.
Okay,
So we have, I quite frankly would say, if this bill ends up in a conference committee, you've got a week, 3 or 4 days or a week to figure out some language now.
We're 24/7, Senator.
all right, so with that, I'm trying to think, Mr. O'Grady, I don't know if you've been tracking this conversation or working on something else.
No, I think you want to, if you're going to do this, I think you want a recommendation on how to ensure significant sensitive parcel acres enrolled as reserve forest land are protected or conserved when the owner of the land wishes to amend the category, subcategory of enrollment of land. That, I mean, I need to play with the language, need to be a little bit better, but that's the general idea.
Sounds like it's maybe Sarah Westman. Okay. And so let's see, I would look, we need, because of the clock, I would look to be able to vote this today. There's, I think if you want another, so I know that you're especially like voting on the fly and all the rest, but do you want a minute to just look at that, revise your own language? And I would, so I'll ask the committee if you're comfortable with having Mr. O'Grady read aloud the new version, and we will, have a new draft. We would go based on substituting that language into this version. So can
You want me to do that again?
yeah, so if you can, I don't know if you want a minute to think, edit, et cetera, or you're feeling like you're pretty much there.
So the report shall include a recommendation on how to ensure significant and sensitive parcel acres, or that's what the one is, should it just be significant or sensitive areas that are enrolled as reserve forest land are conserved or protected when an owner of land wishes to amend the category or subcategory of enrollment.
I think that works. The only possible substitution would be to part suggesting acres or areas.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out on that.
Acres, it's really more like there's the acres, and we measure things in acres and map them and categorize them by acres. So, and the valuations are per acre valuations.
You're good with it? Yeah, okay.
So
We're leaving Senator Westman to Sunday conference. But that was his last chance. Okay, so if Mr. O'Grady, if you could read it just one more time, please. And this is going to be substituting in section F on page 2, right?
No, you're gonna
You're gonna
add
put
it,
over into the report.
you're gonna put it, it will be on page 4, it will be a new subdivision 5.
So we will strike M.
You will strike section 2A in its entirety, the second instance of amendment.
So what I, go down. On the bottom of page 2, there's sub M
Right,
that triggered this whole conversation.
yes, that entire section is being struck.
Okay, right. And then the new language goes over into a report.
The section 4 report will be a new
Including
subdivision.
existing.
Yes. Well, it's an existing report in the bill.
Right.
It's not a current report.
And
So So it would say the report shall include a recommendation on how to ensure significant and sensitive parcel acres enrolled as reserve forest land are protected or conserved when the owner of land wishes to amend the category or subcategory of enrolled.
It's acres, not acres, okay?
If I could ask, what's the sort of the action here is to ensure that these acres are what?
That's protected or conserved, or
Ensure these are the functions and values we refer to elsewhere in the bill, and that's kind of the point, is that they serve, so maybe you have to ensure the continuation of the functions and values.
Maybe before we go to lunch.
So,
Count that out with a vote.
so, could we get a clean draft to vote by 10?
I don't know if you're here for 411 or not.
Okay, so I think we're all set on this. So, I think what we may be able to do is just move up our schedule so that you have to go from here to Ag.
No, I have to go from here to Waste and Means at 10 o'clock.
Uh, So I think,
I can go now and do this now.
okay, and then we'll stay on schedule. We'll pick up, well, we'll pick up 411 at 9:30. Thank you very much, Mr. Brady. Thanks, Commissioner Snyder. So we're gonna pause for 10 minutes to get a clean next draft.
Yeah, I'm sorry, if I could, just understand the process here, and then at that time, you would tend to call the question and